Brother said, "We don't want to see you on family vacation. Go away." I said okay and tore up their passports, and now oh my god, I'm kicked out. But I have something for them. It started with a casual question that I hadn't even thought about asking. "So where are you guys going this year?" I had just walked into the living room where my brother, Jason, and his wife, Rebecca, were sitting with our parents. They were talking excitedly about some big trip they were planning, and I assumed we'd all be going. I mean, why wouldn't we? It's always been that way. Jason didn't even hesitate. "We don't want you on our family vacation. Get out." I blinked. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. But then Rebecca gave this little snort, and my mom and dad exchanged these looks like they were silently agreeing. "Wait, what?" I asked, trying to process what I just heard. Jason leaned forward like he was doubling down. "You're not part of this, okay? It's a family trip. You're just going to ruin it." I stood there for a few seconds stunned. This was Jason. My brother. The guy I'd practically carried through life for years. I'd bailed him and Rebecca out of debt when they were drowning, paid for their anniversary present a $45,000 car, no less, and even paid for Mom and Dad's home repairs when they couldn't afford it. And now? Now they were telling me to stay out of their plans? It was Rebecca who sealed the deal on the absurdity. "It's just necessary," she said, with that smug little smile that made me want to throw something. I don't know what kept me from losing it right then and there. Maybe I was too shocked to react, or maybe I just didn't want to give them the satisfaction. I smiled tightly, nodded and said, "Okay. I'll go. I won't bother you." I turned and walked out of the room, their laughter and voices fading behind me. But something clicked inside me that night. For the first time, I really saw them for what they were: selfish, greedy, and completely uninterested in me as a person. They didn't care about the times I had stepped in and saved them from sinking. They didn't care that I was now in financial trouble. They just cared that I wasn't useful to them anymore. And that's when I decided to act. That evening, while they were out in the courtyard drinking tea and laughing as if everything was perfect, I went into my parents' room. The passports were right where they always were, in the closet on the top shelf. Jason and Rebecca's passports were in their room, in the same place. They didn't even bother to hide them, probably because they never thought I'd do anything. But I was so angry that I couldn't even think straight. Before I knew it, I was sitting at the dining room table, tearing up the passports. When I was done, I left the shreds out in the open. I didn't care who found them first. Let them scream. Let them fight. At least this time they'd have a real reason to leave me out. Rebecca was the first to find her. Her scream was so loud that I heard it from my room, where I was calmly packing my things. Within seconds, Jason and my parents were there, and the screaming began. I walked out into a hallway as they pieced together what had happened. "You did this!" Rebecca yelled at me, her face red and angry. I didn't deny it. I just stood there as Jason came at me, fists clenched, while my parents looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "You're crazy," Jason spat. I shrugged. "You planned all this with the money I gave you, and now you don't even want me around? You treat me like garbage because I can't give you handouts anymore? You're the selfish ones. All of you." That's when my dad lost it. "Get out of my house. Now! Are you serious?" I shot back. "If it wasn't for me, this house would have fallen apart years ago. You wouldn't even have this warm floor you're standing on. Get out!" So I did. I packed a bag, grabbed my wallet, and left without another word. But as I walked out the door, I turned around and said, "You're going to regret this. All of you." And I meant it. I checked into a cheap hotel that night, still angry but strangely calm. I wasn't sure what my next move would be, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. The next morning, I grabbed breakfast and decided to take a walk to clear my head. While scrolling through my phone, I saw something that gave me an idea. It was a real estate listing a beautiful little rental house, just on the outskirts of town. It was way out of my budget for someone who had just lost their job, but I thought, why not? I was already in this mess. I called the realtor, met her that afternoon, and signed the lease on the spot. By the end of the day, I had keys in hand and a place to call my own. It was small but perfect, with big windows and just enough room for one person to breathe. But I wasn't done yet. While at the rental office, I asked the woman a curious question. "Hey, do you know if there's a moving service in town that's fast and, discreet?" She raised an eyebrow, but gave me a number. Later that evening, I showed up at my parents' house with 2 movers and a truck. Jason and Rebecca's car wasn't in the driveway, and my parents were out running errands, so the house was empty. Perfect. The movers didn't ask any questions, which was good because I didn't want to explain. I directed them to Jason and Rebecca's room first. Clothes, electronics, even their stupid throw pillows, everything went into boxes. Then I told the boys to go to the kitchen and start packing up the fancy dishes and appliances, most of which I'd bought. I grabbed my dad's toolbox and unscrewed the wall-mounted TV in the living room. My parents would lose their minds when they saw this, but I didn't care. I'd paid for the TV. I'd paid for half the furniture in this house. If they wanted to kick me out like some freeloader, fine. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. By the time my parents pulled into the driveway, the truck was loaded and the movers were securing the last few boxes. My mom's jaw dropped when she saw the truck. "What the hell is going on?" I stepped out of the house holding her espresso machine. "Oh, this? I'm just taking what's mine." She started to scream, but I ignored her and motioned for the movers to move on. My dad got out of the car angry, but when he saw the mess, he froze. "You're stealing from us now?" he yelled. "Stealing?" I laughed. No. I'm just reclaiming my investments. You know, the ones you conveniently forgot about when you told me to get out. My dad stormed up to me, but before he could say anything else, I held up a piece of paper. "And don't bother calling the police. I have receipts for most of this stuff." That shut him up. As they stood there, stuttering and screaming, I got into my car and followed the truck back to my new apartment. That night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by their stuff, and realized how quiet it was without their constant noise. It was peaceful. But I wasn't done. The next morning I woke up to about 20 missed calls and a dozen texts, mostly from my mom. Jason had sent a few too, though his were full of threats and insults. I ignored them all. In the afternoon there was a knock on my door. It was Rebecca. She was standing there with her arms crossed, looking more angry than I'd ever seen her. "You're going to get all our stuff back," she said. I grinned. "And why would I do that?" "Because," she hissed, "you'll regret it if you don't." I leaned against the door frame. "Oh, Rebecca, I've already regretted so much." "You and Jason? You're not even at the top of the list." She opened her mouth to speak, but then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her face going pale. She turned on her heel and walked away without another word. I didn't think much of it until later that night when I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You've gone too far. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street at 8. Jason." I stared at the screen, debating whether to go. I wasn't afraid of Jason, but something about the tone was different. Curious, I decided to go, but I didn't expect much. When I got there, Jason was sitting in the back corner, looking panicked. This was new. He wasn't the smug, overconfident brother I was used to seeing. "We need to talk," he said as soon as I sat down. "About?" I asked, pretending not to care. "Rebecca found out," he said quietly. "Found out what?" Jason hesitated, looking around as if someone might overhear. "About the money. About how I lied. About everything." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" Jason buried his face in his hands and mumbled. "I told her I paid for the car. And the house repairs. And the anniversary trip to Hawaii. I didn't tell her it was all your money." I sat back, stunned. "Wow. So not only are you a terrible brother, you're a liar." "Nice. She's threatening to leave me," he said, ignoring my jab. "She said if I don't fix this, she's gone." I couldn't help but laugh. And what exactly do you expect me to do about it? Jason leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. Just take some of the blame, okay? Tell her it was a gift, that you wanted to help us. She doesn't have to know that I lied. I stared at him for a long moment, then stood up. You know what, Jason? You're right. I will fix this. But not the way you're hoping. And with that, I walked out, already planning my next move. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I was done with Jason and the whole family. Completely done. But being done didn't mean letting them walk away unscathed. No, I had one last act to complete, and I was going to make sure they felt every bit of what I'd been through. I started with Rebecca. If Jason was afraid she would find out the truth, why not give her the whole picture? That night, I dug up every receipt I'd kept over the years: the car purchase, the house repairs, even the jewelry I'd bought for Rebecca when Jason couldn't afford it. I took pictures of them all and sent them to her with a short message. Thought you'd like to know where all this money really came from. Have a nice life. Smiling face with smiling eyes. The fallout was immediate. About an hour later, I got a call from Jason, but I didn't bother to answer it. He left a voicemail, his voice desperate and cracking as he begged me to stop. You're ruining my marriage, man. Please, just stop. I deleted it. The next day I went to my parents. They'd always acted like I was an ATM, so I decided to show them what life would be like without their favorite cash machine. I called the contractors who had done the house repairs, the plumbing, the roof, the HVAC, and told them that my parents might be behind on their payments. They're having financial difficulties, I said innocently. Just a heads up. Within hours, my parents were getting calls from contractors demanding full payment for the work I'd already covered. Of course, my parents called me in a panic, but I let them go to voicemail, too. The cherry on top? I went to the local utility company and switched the automatic payment on their electric and gas bills back to their account. Since I'd paid for those too, I figured it was only fair that they take care of them now. By mid-afternoon, my mom texted me, begging to talk. Mom, what's going on? Why are we getting all these bills? We can't handle this. Me. Figure it out. You seemed pretty confident when you kicked me out, so I'm sure you'll figure it out. Later that night, I drove by the house and saw my parents on the porch talking to Jason and Rebecca. It looked like they were arguing, and I couldn't help but laugh. The dream team is breaking up, I thought. But I wasn't done yet. Remember their big trip to Spain? I wasn't going to let them get away with that either. Sure, I'd already shredded their passports, but I wanted to make sure they couldn't just reapply and go on as if nothing had happened. So I called the travel agency they bragged about using. I pretended to be Jason, gave them just enough personal information to pass as him, and told them to cancel the whole trip. The woman on the other end sounded confused. But this is a non-refundable booking. You'll lose everything. I grinned. That's okay. Just cancel it. When Jason found out, he stormed over to my rental house like a madman. He banged on the door for 10 minutes before I finally opened it. What's wrong with you? He yelled. I leaned against the door frame, completely unfazed. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you, Jason? You told me I wasn't family anymore. So why should I care about your little trip? You're sick. He spat. You need help. I shrugged. Maybe. But at least I'm not a liar and a user. He stormed off, shouting that I was dead to him. The next day, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Rebecca had packed up and moved out. Apparently the receipts I sent her were the last straw. She had told Jason that she couldn't be with someone who lied to her for years and pretended to be the provider when it was really his pathetic brother who was footing the bill. I got another voicemail from Jason, this one even more desperate. Please, man, I'm sorry, okay? I was a jerk. Just stop. I'll make it up to you. Please. I didn't respond. A week later, my mother showed up at my rental house looking exhausted. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in before she started talking. Everything is falling apart, she said. Your father's health is bad, Jason's in a mess, and we can't afford any of these bills. Please just come back. We'll fix this. I crossed my arms. Why? So you can use me some more? Forget it, Mom. I'm done. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. You're really going to let us lose everything? She asked. I smiled coldly. You already have. And with that, I shut the door. That night, as I was scrolling through my emails, I noticed something strange, a message from a lawyer's office. Curious, I opened it. Apparently, my father had been hiding something. Decades ago, he'd bought a small piece of land that had recently skyrocketed in value thanks to a new development nearby. The email was from a buyer offering an absurd amount of money for it. I realized then that my parents weren't as broke as they pretended to be. They had a safety net all along, yet they let me carry them for years. I forwarded the email to my mom with a simple note. Guess you're going to be okay after all. Good luck. And then I blocked her numbers for good. After forwarding the email to my mom, I blocked her, my dad, and Jason on every platform, calls, texts, social media, everything. I was done with them, and I thought that would be the end of it. But of course they didn't stop. 2 nights later, I heard voices outside my house while I was watching TV. At first I ignored them, but then there was a banging on my door. Open up! It was Jason yelling from the other side. I didn't move. I thought he'd give up, but then I heard my dad's voice. We know you're in there. Don't make us do anything drastic. Something about the tone of his voice caught my attention. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Jason, my dad, and my mom were all standing there, angry. Get out or I'll call the cops, I said loud enough for them to hear. Go ahead, Jason yelled back. You think we care? You've already ruined everything, you psycho. I didn't open the door. Instead, I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and calmly reported a disturbance. 3 people are banging on my door and threatening me, I said. Yeah, I know who they are, but they won't leave. Jason must have heard me because he started kicking the door. You're going to pay for this. Before the cops arrived, they all stormed off, but not before Jason yelled something truly pathetic. Rebecca will come back to me and you'll be nothing forever. I laughed as their car drove off. A week later, I received a text from Rebecca. I hadn't blocked her because, frankly, I was curious what she was up to now that she wasn't tied to Jason. Her message was blunt. Rebecca, can we talk? At first I wasn't sure if I should answer. But then I thought, why not? I was bored, and she was probably as mad at Jason as I was. The next day we met in a cafe. She looked better than I expected, calm, composed, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Why did you send me those receipts? She asked, getting right to the point. Because you deserve to know the truth, I said. She nodded and sipped her coffee. Well, thank you for that. Jason's a piece of crap. Always has been. We talked for hours. It was strange at first, but we found common ground in our shared bitterness toward my family. By the end of the conversation, she was laughing at my jokes, and I was surprised at how easy it was to be around her. She texted me again that night. Rebecca, do you want to come over? I knew it was a bad idea. I knew I was crossing a line that I could never cross again. But I also knew that Jason would lose his mind if he found out. So I went. What started as one night turned into weeks and then months. Rebecca and I kept things casual, no strings, no promises, just an escape for both of us. She was angry at Jason for lying to her all these years, and I was still angry at how my family had treated me. It wasn't love. Not even close. I'd never been the type to sleep with someone out of spite, but this was new territory for me. It felt good to have some power for once, to take something Jason thought was his and make it mine, if only temporarily. Rebecca didn't care about keeping it a secret either. In fact, she seemed to enjoy the idea of Jason finding out. She started dropping hints to mutual friends, little breadcrumbs that I knew would eventually lead back to him. It didn't take long. One night, Rebecca showed up at my house with a grin. "He knows," she said. "How?" I asked. "I made sure he saw a picture of us together," she said casually. I laughed, but I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Sure enough, later that night, Jason showed up at my door again. This time I opened it. "You're disgusting," he said, his face red with anger. "Really? Coming from you?" I shot back. "You've been lying to her for years. At least I'm honest." "She's using you to get back at me," he spat. "Maybe," I said with a shrug. "But I'm still having more fun than you are." Jason lunged at me, but I stepped back and let him stumble into the wall. "Get out," I said calmly, "before I call the police again." He left, muttering threats under his breath. Eventually, things with Rebecca fizzled out. It was never meant to last, and we both knew it. She moved on, and so did I. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding my life. I found a new job, slowly worked my way up, and eventually started earning more than I ever had before. I bought my own house, not a rental, but something I truly owned. As for my family, they remain broken. Jason and Rebecca never reconciled, my parents continued to struggle financially, and I kept them all blocked. Looking back, I know I could have handled things differently. Maybe I didn't have to tear up their passports or take their things. Maybe I didn't have to get involved with Rebecca. But honestly, I don't regret it. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself. And it felt good. Years passed, and life settled into something peaceful. I didn't think about my family much anymore. They became a distant memory, a story I told occasionally when people asked why I didn't go home for the holidays. One day I ran into a mutual acquaintance at the grocery store. She mentioned Jason in passing, saying that he moved to another state after Rebecca officially divorced him. My parents were apparently still living in that house, struggling to make ends meet, but they were too proud to reach out to me. I just nodded and smiled, feeling nothing. That night, sitting in my own home paid for and fully mine, I opened a bottle of wine and thought about how far I'd come. Maybe it wasn't the fairy tale ending most people would hope for, but for me it was perfect. I had my life back, free of their greed and manipulation. And that was more than enough.